for most of eastern and central Ontario, all dealing with freezing rain from areas north of London, Kitchener, Trenton, Hamilton, London, Kingston, all dealing with freezing rain right now. And that freezing rain is going to continue pretty much right through for Monday for all of eastern and central Ontario, up to about 15 millimeters of freezing rain, which is not good because that's the kind of rain that kind of really weighs down all the hydro lines and everything.
Big storms are often measured in terms of the last time. In this part of eastern Ontario, the last time doesn't come close. They say they've never seen one like this.
Environment Canada says yesterday and today's rainfall breaks the record for those two dates and says it hasn't seen such a severe ice storm since a decade ago.
And there's a second storm on the way behind it, which is, again, different from the previous one. In total effect, I don't think we've seen anything quite like it.
Good afternoon. A freezing rain storm has forced a state of emergency in Ottawa.
The province's Emergency Measures Organization says at its worst last night, 500,000 customers were without power in eastern Ontario.
Just when the emergency crews thought it couldn't get worse, it did, as eastern Ontario got slapped with another round of freezing rain and ice pellets.
It's a nightmare here. People have been advised to stay indoors. The streets and the sidewalks are completely frozen. It's very difficult to walk. The trees are frozen everywhere. Huge branches are lying across streets.
I've been with the hydro now 30 and a half years, and I've never seen anything like this or been involved with damage. That wind, strictly wind done on this.
And according to the forecast, the worst may finally be over. But of course, the huge cleanup effort still lies ahead.
They're up before light, working in the cold and the wind until after dark, spurred on by the knowledge there are a lot of people waiting in the cold.
By the time it was over, the winter storm of 1998 would prove to be one of the worst natural disasters in Canadian history. It would also be the severest test that we at Ontario Hydro had ever faced in our 91 years of operation.
In Ottawa, the ice-covered trees looked pretty, but they had trouble handling the thick coating. Branches snapped under the pressure, blocking roads and bringing down power lines. But later, as the ice and snow melted, flooded streets became the bigger problem.
Fallen tree branches littered nearly every street, pulling down wires and damaging property.
The important thing was to get the power back on. We deployed crews in the first couple of days and in fact did get all the power back on momentarily until the second wave came through. At the beginning, it was a severe ice storm, but it was expected to last 24 to 48 hours. We were having power outages, but we expected to have everybody back on in 24 to 48 hours.
The first wave of the storm caused blackouts for over 30,000 hydro customers and damage to two 115,000-volt transmission towers near Ottawa. But within hours, Hydro had responded, pulling in crews totaling 60 people from across the province to assist our 215 local crew members and making arrangements with suppliers for the delivery of poles, insulators, wire, and cable. Besides the staff involved in actually repairing the damage, we also had the dedicated staff at our call center on full readiness. On the first day of the storm, our call center handled over 36,000 calls from concerned customers and almost 28,000 the next day. Restoration efforts began immediately and were progressing well. But then the storm went from bad to worse.
Well, it started raining again, and we don't need more rain.
The radio said ice pellets.
Look at this. It looks disastrous almost on the satellite image here, but we've got the first system moving through. Drizzle and rain almost continuously through the day in Toronto. Freezing rain has returned to Ottawa and southern Quebec and is making its way through the Maritimes. But there's yet another system back here towards Texas that will also move in our direction, and that is why we are looking for a repeat. Not just are we going to see it through the night tonight and through Thursday, but it looks like Friday we could have a similar situation returning to the exact same areas which have already been plagued now for several days with the freezing precipitation.
wasn't until the Thursday when the second wave of the storm came on that we realized that the damage was going to be much more extensive than originally anticipated by the first wave of the storm, and that the ability to get out and assess the damage was going to take another 2 or 3 days.
Big storms are often measured in terms of the last time. In this part of eastern Ontario, the last time doesn't come close. They say they've never seen one like this. Back in the Van Cleek Hill area, hydro crews from across the province were called in to help put things back together. It's happening slowly, but it's happening.
It's kind of a daunting task when you first look at it, but you just, you know, you start and you set up and you get a plan in place and just go at it.
Good evening. The latest tonight on what's being called the ice storm of the century.
It can now be called the ice storm of the century in central Canada.
A freezing rain storm has forced a state of emergency in Ottawa.
Instead of the predicted 15 millimeters of freezing rain, more than 90 millimeters actually fell in parts of eastern Ontario, devastating over 25,000 square kilometers and creating a technical and logistical nightmare of severe proportions.
I guess the first impression is I've never seen anything as extensive as this. So many towers damaged, so many circuits that were damaged with skywire down. I've never seen the amount of damage where towers actually physically collapsed from the weight of the ice. Just the magnitude of it was beyond belief.
Well, when I arrived in the Ottawa area, it was almost complete devastation. There was, I drove from Ottawa south to Winchester on the first evening that I got there, and it was a 20 to 30 kilometer continuous stream of broken poles and wire laying in the ditch. And that was pretty much the scene throughout eastern Ontario. Our customers were suffering a great deal, naturally. We've come to depend on electricity. But it really was a scene of destruction, not simple matters of repairing lines, but rebuilding a good chunk of eastern Ontario and the distribution system.
A second wave of ice rain came in on the Thursday, the Wednesday night and Thursday morning, and by Thursday we'd gone from a couple of circuits out to up to 16 circuits out at one time, including a 500 kV circuit, which is very critical to our system. We certainly had some concerns about the system capacity. We were definitely affecting customers by that point.
In the earlier stages of the storm, the damage was occurring just as we would repair one section. The same section would be hit with more ice and would fall down, literally, in some cases, while we were standing beside it, ready to complete the repairs. So.
Much of the damage has already been done. And as workers struggle to do repairs, wires continue to break and hydro poles topple.
It makes you, you know, just plain frustrated. You no sooner get it up and it bounces back out again. And it's just the sheer volume, the amount of damage is just it's unbelievable. This is a disaster.
But the true extent of that destruction and of the restoration efforts that would be required only became apparent on the Saturday after the storm. It was only then that the weather improved enough to allow helicopters up into the air to get a more accurate assessment of the total storm damage. It was overwhelming. Huge transmission towers had been reduced to rubble by the ice, and miles upon miles of hydro poles had been shattered. Immediately, we began deploying crews from municipal utilities to assist Ontario Hydro crews on the scene. At this point, the number of broken poles was estimated to be at least 2,000, and about 122,000 customers had been affected. There were now 600 line staff and 255 forestry workers, in addition to those from local utility companies working in the area. The Canadian Armed Forces established a base at Van Cleek Hill to support field staff by providing food and lodging. In the next few days, all those people working together, along with caring private individuals from all across the province, would start making major progress in getting life back to normal after what was now being seen by all as a major natural disaster. While many thousands came together to ensure that people affected by this massive storm were safe, Hydro had its own mounting challenges to face, and we faced those challenges extremely well. At the first possible opportunity, we began compiling the detailed reports from the field that would enable us to create a full restoration plan and an estimated timetable for when our customers' power would be restored.
Yeah, very good, Ken. The lights are on here and holding. Thanks very much.
By early evening, Jeff Meek's crew is well into their fourth 16-hour shift.
We just can't throw people into the field and have them put hardware up in the air. We had to make sure that the work was done safely, that the work protection was administered properly, that people were working in areas that we knew to be safe. And then they can just go ahead and do their work and do the work they did. They accomplished in 18 days what would have taken us months to do in normal times.
During the entire crisis, and despite enormous transportation restrictions, we ensured that necessary materials, staff, and equipment were continually flowing into the affected areas. All of this was being coordinated out of Kipling's own Emergency Response Center, whose staff did an absolutely remarkable job. By January 7th, we had all of our suppliers on round-the-clock call. One supplier, Annexer, managed to transport and deliver massive amounts of cable all the way from Texas to Ottawa area sites in just 36 hours.
In Ontario, some 100,000 homes stand in the cold and dark this hour. The provincial government and military are joining forces to build a tent city for 1,000 hydro workers at Vankleek Hill, north of Cornwall, to serve as a base for the massive job of restoring the power.
Basically what the Royal Canadian Dragoons based out of Petawa have been doing in and around the area of Ottawa and south of Ottawa is rendering assistance basically to Ontario Hydro in the fashion of chainsaws for cutting down trees that are hampering the Ontario Hydro from fixing and re-erecting poles and lines and all that stuff.
To see merchants from Hull, from the Saguenay, giving a hand to Eastern Ontario, to see people from Pembroke and Sudbury and elsewhere bringing truckloads of wood to us, and people from all over who've contributed, assisting fixing the hydro lines. I think it makes us all feel proud, and despite the difficulties in which we are living now, I think we must be very proud to be Canadians and to live in a country where people have that kind of affection towards one another.
Ontario Hydro also made sure that the results, as well as the projected results of the restoration efforts, were being communicated to our customers. Drawing on additional communications experts from across the corporation, we quickly created an emergency communications center in Ottawa. Here we coordinated the work of frontline public relations officers, preparing daily media briefings and newspaper and radio ads that kept everyone informed about where and when progress was expected to be made. It was a remarkable achievement in the face of continuing bad weather and difficult working conditions. By January 15th, Hydro's restoration efforts were in full force, bringing back electricity to over 60% of our affected customers. By January 20th, only 11 days after the Great Storm of 1998, we had managed to bring electricity back to over 90% of those who'd been without it.
There were thousands of people involved in getting the lights back on for the province in Eastern Ontario. There were the line crews and the forestry crews out there in the cold and freezing rain, 16 hours a day for 3 weeks, 8 hours off, 16 hours on. There were the people behind the scenes integrating, buying poles, 10,000 poles and more, insulators, transformers. There are people dealing with the customers, both in the field and in the call center, dealing with customer queries, complaints, concerns. We owe all of those thousands of people a great deal of thanks.
During the heart of the storm, we had over 2/3 of the company's entire provincial line staff working in Eastern Ontario, and answered from the call center an astounding 283,000 requests for information. It was a huge task. In total, Hydro used 9,529 poles, 72,926 insulators, 2,804 kilometers of wire and cable, and 1,436 transformers. All this material was in the hands of over 2,200 professional and dedicated men and women of Ontario Hydro, who worked so hard for so many days to get life back to normal.
In terms of mobilizing people and material and the willpower to get the job done, I think we did an absolutely great job. Our people responded, and in 18 days they've done what would have taken us months to do earlier. I think they did a wonderful job. I think they got everything restored in the shortest possible time, and certainly we can use that experience to cover off other emergencies that may occur in the future as well.
We all owe the employees of Ontario Hydro a great deal of thanks in managing so professionally and competently the damage and destruction caused by this ice storm.